Hello and welcome back to the Jazz Rants. I'm glad you joined me. And sometimes you have to laugh after your own mistakes. Years ago I had the opportunity to play with a great bass player, Bill Crow. Now, he wrote a book about jazz anecdotes. You may have read it. Anyway, he told me a couple of stories that weren't in his book. They were pretty fascinating. One was the very first time he got to play with Stan Getz. He was in a club and one of his strings broke on his bass. And it just so happens there was another bass player in the club that had his bass with him. And so he asked him if he could borrow his bass, and he got up there with the bass and he started playing, and he realized that the other bass player was left-handed and he had it strung backwards. So he had to play the whole first gig with Stan Getz playing backwards on the bass. You bass players will appreciate that, I'm sure. The other story he told me was about Hank Jones, and he went to, had a gig with Hank Jones. He went to Hank Jones' apartment to rehearse, and they rehearsed, and Hank Jones has written out all the charts beautifully in red ink and so on. And when they got on the gig, they got on stage, they turned on the stage lights, and the stage lights were red, and so all the ink disappeared. So he had to fake the whole gig with Hank Jones without having any charts. Anyway, that's a funny story that I heard from him. And now we're going to continue now with something that was requested by a subscriber about counterlines. Like how do you come up with counterlines? How do you come up with accompaniment to melody? And so on, and contrapuntal ideas, and also the idea of the suspensions, the 4/3 and the 9/8. So I'm going to be talking about this in this video. Counterpoint. That's where you have a melodic line and you have a second melody that it plays against the melodic line and complements it. And it also should have a melodic quality to it as well, or harmonic support. So we'll start out with the first version now. Comes from a recent posting I did of My Funny Valentine. We're going to take it from the bridge. The first example comes from the song My Funny Valentine, the bridge. This is an arrangement I wrote and posted recently. And let's look at the melody. This is the melody. There's that rising line, but other than that, it's rather dull. They add the bass line, it doesn't do much for it either. But now I'm going to add a second voice in the left hand that's going to be harmonized with and be a counterpoint against the melody. Okay, so that's the second voice. Now the third voice will be up here. So it's this one now. Let's hear that. Let's just hear the two voices with this third voice, the melody in the third voice. So now that is going to move with the second voice as well, like this. So now let's put them together with the bass line. It's really starting to sound nice, and I think that you can even vary it and do more shading and even more variation in the rhythm. So now we'll look at it a little bit further. You might ask, well, how do I know how to do this? Well, it has to do with you studying music and counterpoint and four-part writing, writing choral music like for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. That's all happening here, and how to complement a melody, how to understand how the bass works, the bass line and everything, and the harmony. So now what I did was I have this basic thing is E flat major to F minor to E flat major inverted and then F minor. That's all that's happening at the beginning here. And like, so I'm adding harmony here now. I add this diminished chord. I know I can use a diminished because it's going to take me back to the E flat again. So it could be a D diminished or a B. But instead of going to E flat triad, I go to E flat with a suspended fourth. So you're going to hear a lot of suspensions here. Here's a 4-3, and then in the melody there's another 4-3 here. See, so that's 4-3 on E flat. This is 4-3 on the B flat chord, which is the melody now. And I do this. So I have in the left hand I have, which sounds nice against that melody. Complements it nicely. Now this time the bass line is going to move down to a inverted E flat. So I just don't want to use the same progression. So now I'm going to vary it by inverting the E flat chord, you know, like, and then another, that kind of 2-1 movement there. There's a flat 9 in there just for variation. Then here's a descending line like that, right through the harmony, like that. So let's get that again. Let's get that again. There it is. There's another 9-8, taking us now to the 4 chord. Then this nice complementary line that supports that held note in the melody. And we're back to the last part of the song right there. So once you've worked out all the harmonies and the technical things and the counterpoint and that sort of thing, you try to make it musical by dynamics, of course, and varying the rhythm, how these voices interact, like this. The second example comes from something I posted on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, one of the first tunes you ever learned, right? It just has 3 chords. C chord to the F chord, to the C chord, and then to the 4 chord or the 2 chord. To the 1 chord, then the 5. So it's just C, F, C, then D minor 7 or F, C, G chord to the C. So now I have this counter line in the left hand, which is really complementing the chord. It's arpeggiating the chord. C, in other words, the C chord is the first chord, so it goes 1, 5, 3, then an approach here, stepwise approach to the 3 here down here, then to the 1, then up here to the 6, but approaching the 4 chord. So it's sort of like you have to know how to create lines around the harmonic structure and the chord progression. Back to 1, then 1, 4, 1, 5, 5, 5, 1, like that. So let's listen to those 2 lines together. Now I'll show you the 3 lines, the 3-part, the 3rd part. So now in 3-part contrapuntal harmony, you're going to have another voice in there that complements the 2nd voice. So what it is this. It's the and down here. Okay, so let's listen to that now. Notice there's a lot of suspension, so you have, there at the end you have like, let's go through it. There's a suspension there, right? 4-3 again. Then you have this one. That one. There's another, a 9-8 again. There's a diminished G chord. Then you have, so that's F minor, F major to F minor, C. There's your suspension again, 4. Then it stays on the 4 suspension down to 2 to 3. So a lot of suspensions. When you study the great masters like Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and so on, you learn that they are geniuses and they're masters of their craft. In other words, they have great intellectual knowledge and they're scholars, but they also have tremendous ears and great imagination. So all that put together creates great music. Signing off from the Jazz Ranch, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. The altar dominant man, he hooked up with one of those lady cowhands and they went off to Oshkosh, Ohio to visit her relatives. So I was glad to get rid of him for a while. But he'll be back, I'm sure, very soon. So until next time, I will say, in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, swing loose. And we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.